All right, that is a band called Dust with an old rock classic. Well, maybe not classic to everybody, but a classic to me as a fan. That is Walk in the Soft Rain, and on the phone right now, we've got one of the most legendary bass players out there, as well as somebody who played on my probably top 5 album ever, the Through the Fire HSAS record. Of course, I'm talking about Kenny Aaronson. Kenny, how are you, man?
I'm doing really good. Thanks, Chris. Everything is great.
Excellent, man. Well, Kenny, as I just said, you played on one of my all-time favorite records, which is that HSAS record, that Through the Fire. An amazing project that just didn't seem to go anywhere. You know, I mean, the record went out of print almost as quick as it came out, but clearly is a classic, and I'm sure you probably hear that from a lot of people you talk to, no?
All the time.
What happened with that project? How did that not become the vehicle for you and for Sammy and Neil Sean?
Well, you know, I thought about that many times, and I've never really come to any definitive conclusion other than the fact that I believe, in my opinion, the mistake was not taking it out on the road like a real band should do.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's all about really getting out there and playing in front of people. And the concept for that was to try to, you know, Sammy, you know, I was in Atlanta recording with Foghat at the time, and then they called me and asked me to drop everything and come out to San Francisco and work for a month putting this thing together. Okay. And that's what they did. You know, they paid me a chunk of money, cut me into a piece of the action, both Michael Shreve and myself. We came out, Sammy and Neil wrote everything in a month. I mean, we rehearsed every single day, and we were writing the stuff on the spot. I mean, Sammy was just coming out with lyrics, and Neil was just coming up with licks and ideas for these songs. And basically, it was co-managed by Neil and by Sammy's respective managers at the time.
Okay.
And the idea was to just sort of record it live, and we did about 7 shows up in that area of Northern California, and to do a long length video, and to try to sell it that way.
Okay.
And that was all fine and well, but to me, something like that should have gone out on the road. We should have gone out there, really promoted it. We should have played all over the country. We should have done it like a real band.
Sure. And
that, to me, in my opinion, was the mistake. I mean, that was a rock and roll band that should have played live. I mean, we should have really gone out there and done it.
Right.
And they just figured, oh, we could sit back and sell this thing, you know, by you know, MTV and all this stuff. And I just felt that was the mistake.
Sure. And it is ironic because if I'm not mistaken, you only played 6 shows, correct?
We only did like 6 or 7 shows, and actually, if you listen to the album, you will notice that only one track has an audience on it.
Right.
And that's because, as I remember it, none of the shows were really quite good enough to put out as they were done. So, as a safety net, we recorded sound checks.
Oh, nice.
And what you're hearing is basically a long sound check. We just recorded everything to make sure we had it. And then I think there was the one track that was good enough to use. I forget what the track is now. It's been
My
a long
Hometown.
time.
It's My Hometown.
But that one track with the audience, I think that's the only one that really had quality enough to put out, you know, the way it was.
Sure, yeah, that's My Hometown. Right, the song.
San Francisco.
The song was My Hometown.
Oh, sorry. Yes, My Hometown. That's the one. That's the one. Yes,
definitely. No, in my actual hometown is one of the 6 shows you played, and I actually saw it as a humongous Journey fan. I went and saw it.
Yeah, like we did Marin County Civic Center. We played in San Francisco. I guess we probably did San Jose or something,
right.
and
And
I can't remember now, but it was basically up in that area.
Right, and it just was fantastic, man. But
well, that was a really great. I mean, those guys. I mean, it was really amazing watching them work together because Sammy and Neil, those guys are, they've been friends for a long time, and they were talking for a long time about, doing something together and pulling me into it. I'd see them on the road. If I was out with Derringer or whoever I was playing with, and I'd run into Sammy here, I'd run into Neil there,
right.
And there's always, hey, Kenny, we got to do something. So it was really exciting to do it, and watching them just, write all this stuff just every day. They'd be writing, and Sandy would just be coming up with lyrics, and it was just a really nice process and very intense,
Sure.
But after all that, I just felt like, man, we got to go on the road with this thing, and they just felt like they wanted to try to do it almost like I felt like we were being armchair rockers or something.
Right, sure.
Trying to do it like through a video or something and not really doing it live.
Right.
So, but anyway, I mean, I certainly enjoyed the experience,
Sure.
I think, actually, you know what? Every time I get a royalty check and I see how small it is, that's when I realize, damn it, we should have taken this thing on the road.
Yeah, no kidding. I definitely hear you there. Well,
but no regrets.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, Kenny, obviously your career has been very vast with more bands and musicians that people know and have heard and records that people probably own and don't even know that you've played on. But it all started for you in 1970 or 71 with this project that did not get huge called Dust. And I thought maybe a good place to start was maybe for you to give a little background of the band, because I know it didn't necessarily blow up, but it certainly launched all three of you into pretty big time success, but just with different vehicles.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing actually, because we were basically three high school dropouts.
Sure.
I mean, and so, I don't know what would have happened had it not been to that band giving all of us a career of some sort. I mean, with Richie, he became a producer. Mark, well, we certainly know what happened with Mark.
Sure.
And with me, it just gave me this incredibly long and very varied and very musically interesting career, and I've had the honor and the pleasure of playing with some of the world's heavy hitter musicians and guitar players in particular, and it's it was just three kids who dreamt of being in a band and having success of some sort. We lived it. We breathed it. We quit school for it.
Sure.
We gave our parents grief over it because of all that. I mean, I'm sure my parents, I'm sure I increased the amount of gray hair in my parents' heads, when I said, I'm no longer going to school anymore. I can't do this. I want to play music.
Right.
And, it was, back then, it was, they weren't happy about it. But ultimately, I know my parents figured he's going to be okay when a few years after Dust, and I was in Stories, and we had Brother Louie, and that became number one.
Right.
And we played at Carnegie Hall in New York City, and we were presented with gold records on stage. And after the show, I had to go to an after-show party, and I gave my parents my gold records to take home with them. And I think that's when my mom in particular probably felt like, well, Kenny's going to be okay. She finally saw that, you can actually do something with this rock and roll thing.
Right, definitely. Now, for me, an outsider that I was like 4 when Dust came out. So I don't remember the band, really, other than through the reissues that are coming out now. But it really seems like you guys were almost, in my eyes, more of like a hybrid band that was anywhere between what Black Sabbath was doing at the same time, and Cream and those types of bands, but not quite as dark as those bands, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that, and that's another thing. I mean, we're constantly being referred to as metal or proto-metal and all these things, and to me, well, first of all, as far as my memory goes, I do not remember the term metal or heavy metal being in existence at that time.
Okay.
It was hard rock, is the way I remember it.
Sure.
And when I think, and I've said this before, when I think of the term metal, somehow I feel like metal music is more one-dimensional, and Dust was anything but that, because, I mean, Richie was into what? Richie and Kenny Kerner, together and individually, were into the things that they were into, which could have been the stuff that the three of us shared, Zeppelin, Jeff Beck, Jethro Tull, Procol Harum. There was a lot of incredible music going on back then, and we were always into that stuff. On the other hand, I know Richie and Kenny were very much into the Bee Gees, which I used to poo-poo, at the time, thinking, this is, I don't want to hear strings. Right. Although to this now, at this point in time, I love old Bee Gees.
Right.
You accept things whenever it's ready for you to, in your life to accept it. But I mean, I loved country music back then. I always have loved country music. I mean, I'm a huge, and I'm not talking about new country. I'm talking about old classic country.
Sure.
Patsy I love George Jones, Loretta Lynn, Johnny Cash.
Right.
And I loved steel guitar. And there I am on this rock record playing dobros and slide guitars, and I had a pedal steel, and that's on there. And we just did this stuff. And then on a tune like Thusly Spoken, we got string sections, we've got pianos. I mean, we weren't one-dimensional. We were messing around with anything that we were into. We were trying to, do something with it. It was definitely varied. I have to say that's the one thing. I mean, it's particularly the second Dust record. To me, it's just interesting where we kind of twist and turn and sort of take it on a ride, style-wise.
Sure. Now, the one thing that's interesting to me is that you guys broke up after only 2 records. And the reason I say that is because at that period of time, in that era, it seemed like the record companies were willing to give a band like that, or I'll point to...
Absolutely. Back in those days, I mean, these days, if you don't produce results in 30 seconds,
right.
your ass is kicked out the door. They
Sure.
don't want to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back then, you could do 2, 3, 4 records perhaps, and the record label would support you if they believed in something and they wanted to try to make it work.
Sure.
They backed you up with a budget. They let you go into the studio. They let you, it's obviously that basically no longer exists and
right.
hasn't probably existed in a long time. But yeah, it was very much like that back then. And you know what? It's interesting because it's like how Richie actually puts it, I think is the most accurate way, is we didn't really break up. We didn't just break up. It just sort of petered out because we weren't really doing much. I mean, we weren't getting tours. We weren't making advances, really. We weren't, the gigs weren't getting any better. The money,
mm-hmm.
it just wasn't really going anywhere. And we just all sort of kind of went in just different directions. I mean, Richie and Kenny started to produce. They got the opportunity. Richie realized this is what he likes to do.
Sure.
And I ended up, moving on into Stories because that band had reshuffled it. Stories and Dust were on the same label and we had the same manager.
Okay.
And when Dust was sort of petering out, at the same time, Stories was in trouble, and they were reshuffling the band around.
Sure.
And so the original founder, Michael Brown, he split to do other things, and I became the bass player, and Ian Lloyd took over on piano. So it just sort of, reshuffled and continued. And that's just sort of what happened. Just, there wasn't a point where we went, all right, this is it. It's over. Just,
Right.
this thing's just not happening. It just sort of flew like dust in the wind, man. It just kind of petered out.
Sure. Now, with either of those two bands, with either Dust or Stories, which were both bands that had, like lukewarm success, but seemed like there was something there. Do you ever look back, and obviously you can't change the past, but have you ever looked at it and then maybe looked at a band like, I don't know, say Journey, who put out 4 or 5 albums, where the record companies did support them before they took off? Did you ever look at a situation like that and say, man, if we would have stuck with this a couple of more records to find our footing?
No, I never look at it that way. I just see it as that's what it was, that's what it did, and there you have it, and you just move on.
Sure.
I never look back and really, okay, well, like I said with the HSAS thing, yes, I feel if we had taken that on the road, it could have maybe gotten some legs and done better.
Sure.
But but you'll never know that, and it just is what it is. I don't live for the past or anything. So, I don't live thinking about that kind of stuff. It just did what it did,
Right.
What it did was it launched our careers as musicians, is what it did.
Exactly.
And to me, that's the important thing.
Sure.
I mean, I became who I became and have done what I have done because of Dust.
Sure.
Because of the circumstances. I mean, it's really, when you think about it, it's because my parents moved to a certain neighborhood when I was a certain age, and I met a certain bunch of kids my age who were playing guitars and they needed a bass player, and I happened to be a bass player looking to get in with a group of kids and be in a band. And then that led me to this other neighborhood where Dust was hanging out, and there was Dust, and eventually I became in Dust. It's all a series of little things that go that find the place. And one thing leads to another, and boom, you've got, all of a sudden you're thrust into a career.
Right, sure.
You don't plan that stuff. It just happens.
Right.
It's a real organic thing, and it's what I do is I do think about, wow, I'm here, whatever I am or who I am or what I have, my reputation, whatever it is, my experiences, it all comes from those initial little things that fell into place.
Right, definitely.
Even something as just like moving to another neighborhood and meeting new kids. Mm-hmm. All this is what led to this happening. It's a beautiful organic thing is what I'm saying. It's just incredible when you're thinking about it that way.
Sure, definitely. Now, as someone that has had, fairly significant success as you have and not just in the beginning, but obviously you've played on a great many records that have had a great deal of success. What did you think when you saw your former bandmates from Dust having the success they had? I mean, what did you think when you saw, Ricky's first Kiss record or Marky hitting with the Ramones? I mean, what does an outsider that used to play with these guys and knows them in a different way, what do you think when you see that kind of success all of a sudden happen for these guys?
I just think it's amazing that the three of us were able, we're lucky enough and to be able to be in the right place at the right time for these things to happen. I mean, it's like I started producing people late in my career. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something that I never knew I would be interested in until way late in my life. And so now I do production work on occasion, and I love it because it's a whole different thing. After playing bass your whole life.
Sure.
But, Richie, that was something that he wanted to do from the very beginning. Like, he used to be home and plan. Like, he would plan, how he would layer the tracks of next time he go in to record. And he was thinking about that stuff back in the day. I think that's great. And Mark was always just such a fucking amazing animal of a drummer, man.
Right.
But it took him a while until he got with the Ramones. He was playing with Richard Hell. He was doing different things, which eventually led him to the Ramones.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that the three of us just, we were three kids. We were dropouts. We hated school. Back then, you had the Vietnam War going on. Everything was very polarized. It was rough just going to school every day because your gym teachers would call you a faggot because your hair was getting long.
Right.
I mean, it was very, very hard to deal with stuff like that. And we couldn't deal with it, and we quit, and we had music in our hearts. This is what we wanted to do. And we were like, damn the torpedoes, this is what I'm going to do. I need to do this. And it worked out for all of us on one level or another. And I just think it's really great, And the three of us, we're alive, we're healthy, we're still working. I mean, Mark and I in particular, we're still very active musically. I mean, I do sessions all the time. I just played in New York City with Sylvain from the Dolls last night. I got a project. I'm going to produce a young band from New Jersey. I still go on the road. I still love playing live in front of human beings. I love to listen to real music.
Right.
And I'm just thankful for all that stuff, and we're still, here to talk about it, and it's great. And I just think this renewed interest in Dust is really cool, and it makes me feel a little more redeemed about stuff. I mean, I wish it could have more success, but, I know a lot of people are very passionate about it because they tell me,
Sure.
and I just think it's really nice to have some recognition and to realize that it's all a really good thing. It's a positive good thing. It's people react to it very positively, and you realize, wow, I never thought, when I look back at the stuff that I've done, I see the blemishes, I see the pimples, Sometimes I don't realize just how people are affected by this music.
Right.
Because I was in it, so it's hard for me sometimes to see past, the blemishes and stuff. So, when people Facebook me or call me or just tell me what, how much they love Dust and how it affected them or made them want to play bass or, whatever it is. I just think it's really great.
Sure.
It makes me feel really good.
Absolutely. Now, Kenny, you are in a very, very elite group of people on bass that is one of those guys that gets the call when somebody needs solid foundation laid down for their tracks. And I would say you and Tony Franklin are probably the big two. And then there's other guys obviously that do it. But I mean, just looking at your catalog and so many bands, Derringer and Blue Oyster Cult and Michael Monroe and Sammy Hagar, I mean, Billy Idol, the list is so long of guys that have had big success. How does a guy like you become that guy? How do you become the go-to phone call for bands, that just need a player to come in and lay it down?
I think that the thing with me is that I think that I'm very much into doing what that particular music or that project or that artist needs. And I give what I feel is needed, and I respect the artist, I respect the song. I feel I understand a lot of different genres of music, and I'm able to faithfully do what's right for that music at the time.
Okay.
One of the things that I certainly like, things could work out different ways. You could be in a huge band and have this career like, say, the guys in Kiss.
Okay.
And make fortunes and just bags of money, just all the... Or you can kind of be a guy that does a lot of different things and has a lot of varied experiences, which is what my career has been. I mean, I wouldn't trade that. I mean, I thrive on variety. I like to play different kinds of music. I like to play with different players, and I learn from all these people. To me, all that makes you a much better musician, and I think, which is part of, I know that I'm very versatile, and I understand, and I know what to do under a lot of different circumstances. I know what to do.
Sure.
I know what to play or what not to play. And what not to play is more important than how much you are playing at times.
Sure.
And a lot of younger players don't necessarily always understand that, or it takes them a little while. It certainly took me a while. But that's the process, man. That's the learning process. And you get that a lot easier when you're working with different people all the time, and people are going, I remember when I started working with Leslie West very early on in my career. Leslie was the first real heavy hitter guitar player that I worked with, and I got a lot of experience from working with him. And he yelled at me every so often, like if I started playing too busy because I was very influenced by Jack Bruce when I was a kid. He'd go, Ken, we don't need another Jack Bruce in the band,
Right.
And this is how you learn, and it's a process, man, and that makes you a better player at the end of the day,
Sure, definitely.
And I thrive on that. I would get, it's nice being in one place and where you're playing with somebody and you get a chance to really get into the music, but at the same time, I feel like I still thrive on versatility.
Sure.
I like doing different things. It's just it just makes things more interesting.
Sure. Now,
And it makes you think. You got to think about stuff.
Right. And one of the things where you're talking about the diversity is you are almost ironically on what I would call two underground classics. Obviously the HSAS that we talked about before, but also on Michael Monroe's Not Faking It record, which was completely different. But at the same time, that album didn't necessarily have commercial success, but I think that's one that anybody that's into that whole punk metal crossover type of a thing loves that record. And, it's just ironic that you laid the foundation on two very different projects that are so well respected, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, it's sort of like I said, you can't, a lot of times people feel like they have to put you in a category.
Sure.
And I hate that. Don't put me in a category. I enjoy playing different things, and whatever I'm doing at the time with whoever I'm doing it with, I'm into that. But it doesn't mean I can't the next day go and play with something just completely the opposite. If I like that, why not?
Right.
But does that mean you can't pigeonhole me as saying, oh, Kenny Aaronson, metal player.
Right.
Kenny Aaronson, rockabilly player. Kenny Aaronson, blues, hard rock, whatever. I do pretty much, listen, I play all forms of pop music. I'm not a jazz player and I'm not a classical player, but I could pretty much play anything. And if I like it, why shouldn't I be able to play it?
Absolutely.
And I don't like being having to be stuck with some kind of label.
Sure.
It's music, and that's what I do. I play music.
Absolutely.
Well, I shouldn't have to play one kind of thing.
Right.
I want to play whatever the hell I like.
Sure, definitely.
Geez, I wouldn't mind playing with the Black Keys. Whatever. It's like, if it's something I like, I'm going to say to myself, I could play with these guys.
Sure, definitely. Definitely.
And why not, if I can?
Yeah, no doubt, definitely.
Yeah. So there you go, man.
Sure. Well, let me wrap up with one last question for you. If you could turn back the clock, which obviously we can't, but which would you prefer? That Dust would have made it huge, or that you would have had the career that you've had?
I'm glad that I had the career that I had.
Okay.
It would have been nice if Dust was able to have maybe more of a shot at again, you know what it is? It just is what it is.
Sure.
I love the career that I've had. and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. Dust was great for what it was at the time.
Right.
And without that, none of anything else would have happened.
Sure, definitely.
So it's very important. And of course, sure, why wouldn't I want it to have had, to have done better?
Sure.
But it did pretty good for the three of us in terms of where we all ended up.
Right, absolutely.
So in a sense, it was fine.
Yeah.
It did what it was meant to do.
Yeah. Hey, bottom line, none of you three guys ended up in a cubicle, right?
Absolutely. Could never do that.
There you go.
We haven't ended up in a cubicle, and we're not in coffins yet. So life is good.
Right, exactly. Well, Kenny, obviously, man, I'm sure you could tell I'm a humongous fan, so it's obviously an honor talking to you. And the new Dust, or not new, but the Dust records have been reissued. They're on Sony Legacy. You can pick those up on Amazon.com or anywhere that still sells CDs, I would imagine. And Kenny, where can people find out more about you or get in contact with you?
They could just go to my website. It's just KennyAaronson.com. I got a nice website. I'm available. I'm there. I love hearing from people. If people want me to play on their records, on their CDs, or if they need audio files of my bass playing, I do this. I do it. All they have to do is contact me. Okay. Very easy. KennyAaronson.com. I'm there.
Awesome. Well, Kenny, before I let you go real quick, we ask everybody what is known as the traditional classic metal show question. As a bass player, you may have an answer for this. You may not, but here it goes. How has Lemmy from Motorhead influenced your career?
He hasn't.
Not at all, huh?
Not at all.
Fair enough. Well, all right, Kenny. Well, Kenny has.
Well, what were you hoping I was going to say?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know what? We've had every answer from not at all to we've had big, long, drawn out answers where people picked up their bass because they heard Ace of Spades or whatever. So. It varies from person to person.
I love Lenny because I think he's such a real character. He's just so. I mean, I've hung out with him in L.A.
Sure.
I've met him. He's a real piece of work. You gotta love him for being Lenny. But musically, no, he has had no influence on me whatsoever.
Fair enough. Well, Kenny,
there you go.
As a tradition on the show, we always let the artist pick a closing track. It could be Dust, or it could be anything you've played, or it could be something you didn't play. What would you like us to play to close the interview?
Oh, my. Gee, off the top of my head, I don't know. I wasn't ready for that. But play another Dust track. Play Love Me Hard.
All right. Well, let's check it out right now. This is Dust, and it is your classic metal show.